Samsara dana narira loka Janaya karunaya naganacha Bhaktasya kayana gunana asya Vande Guru Sri Charanaravrinda Mahaprabhu ki tananita gita Aditramādhyam manasorasena Ramanchakam tasu taranga bhaju Vande Guru Sri Charanaravindam Samsara dava narira loka Pranaya karuna
Satsvarupa dasa Goswami ki jai! Vyasa Puja Mahamotsav ki jai!
Welcome to the 2015 Vyasa Puja of me, my disciples, and avid readers of my books. I'm glad so many could attend, despite the cold season, although we have a very nice day today. Despite the travels that you had to make to get here, and my request that you attend a 4 p.m. meeting. This year I've been given an assignment by the 50th Anniversary Committee of Prabhupada's arrival in America, which puts me in a certain frame of reference and thrusts me into the mainstream of ISKCON. I've been invited to write a Prabhupada meditation starting October 8th, 215, and continuing for the entirety of the year 216. I try to write about what Prabhupada was doing 50 years ago on this date. And when I don't have specific information, I write a timeless meditation to fit that period. When we get to the year 2016, I'll have more specific information to write about what he was doing 50 years ago. These meditations are being posted on 2 sites. We will give out business cards with the websites on them, iskonnews.org and dandavats.com. They're posted in prominent places on these sites, and thousands of devotees are reading them every day. Publishing so much about Prabhupada is putting me in a similar situation to when I was writing Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita approximately 35 years ago. I'm being forced to recognize that Prabhupada is the preeminent Shiksha Guru for all the devotees in ISKCON. This is healthy for my relationship with my disciples. It's the duty of the ISKCON Gurus to assure their disciples of their direct relationship with Srila Prabhupada and to nurture their Prabhupada awareness through their teachings. As with everything I do, I'm doing this through my writings, such as the books Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, many other books, and now Prabhupada Meditations. And I try to do it by example. Telling you about the Prabhupada Meditations and its implications is the introductory theme to my Vyasa Puja lecture. Now I want to go a step further. What do my disciples expect of me, and what do I expect of them? I think you expect of me, as far as possible, to be an ideal devotee in sadhana and preaching, and to give you personal guidance in spiritual life. I do this through my books and websites, but also through personal meetings and letter correspondence. I want you to feel confident that wherever you live in the world, I am keeping my promise, and by your linking to me, I am linking you to Prabhupada, the Parampara, the holy name, and giving you an opportunity to go back to Godhead. Those are heavy expectations, but I think you should expect them of me because it's stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that no one should become a spiritual master unless he can deliver his dependents from death. So in short, that's what you should expect from me. And what do I expect from you? I expect loyalty and love. You should express this by following your initiation vows of 4 rules and 16 rounds. That's loyalty and love. Your spiritual master is a writer, so you should read his books, websites, and meditations. If possible, you should volunteer for some service in his mission. In past years, I've been mentioning the Legacy Project. My desire is to fulfill it and bring it about. Ever since my Shiksha disciple Satsvarupa Govinda has joined, we've made great progress. And it's visible on the website iskonlegacy.com. Satsvarupa Govinda has been giving out service to volunteers. Devotees are preparing books to be put on the website. The thrust of the Legacy Project is to put all my books in print, in e-book format. I will make a special presentation about this and tell you of our progress. And and who participated in it to make it possible. Shonaka Rishi from the Oxford Project for Hindu Studies warned me that I should also keep in print my hard copy books for archives and study by scholars, but we're going slowly on this. After I pass away, I want to keep all my books in print, and it's the duty of my disciples to bring this about. The spiritual master and the disciple have a blissful relationship. They chant and hear about Krishna and Prabhupada, and this is their main connection. I'm playing on the Brihat Madranga, and I invite you to participate by reading my books. Both the disciple and the spiritual master have to be qualified. The disciple is qualified by inquiry, submission, and service. If you don't have inquiry, there's no need to approach a spiritual master out of fashion. Nor should you think, I have inquiry, but I don't need a spiritual master. Anyone who thinks he doesn't have to approach a spiritual master is like a ship without a rudder. Sampradaya vihina ye nishpala nimitta mata. The mantra you have received, if it's not received in Sampradaya, will have no effect. Maharaj Parikshit was an ideal disciple. He surrendered to Sukadeva Goswami and asked him, what is the duty of a human being, especially one who is about to die? Sukadeva Goswami told him to hear and chant about Krishna, and he commenced to tell him the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. Arjuna was an ideal disciple. He was perplexed about his material duty, and he asked Krishna, I am a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. The spiritual master is coming in disciplic succession from a pure devotee, spiritual master. The critical student becomes the next spiritual master. The spiritual master blesses him and authorizes him to initiate disciples. When he passes the test of the spiritual master. So both have to be sincere, and the disciple has to be inquiring about release from the problems of birth, death, disease, and old age. By association with devotees and scriptures, he should learn what is a bona fide spiritual master. Kirtan Ras, I'm getting hot in here. No. There's an interesting lecture by Prabhupada that he gave while he was still in Dr. Mishra's yoga studio that is relevant here. He was speaking about how if a person has an unqualified spiritual master, his whole life can be ruined. A boy spoke up and asked, "But if a person is in ignorance, how can he know who is a bona fide spiritual master?" Prabhupada replied, "Yes," indicating that this was a serious question. He then said, "It's just like if you're seeking after a school. You have to know what a school is. If you go to a cloth shop, it won't be profitable." And then he quoted 2 verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. One was Tadvigyanartham Saguru Eva Vigachchit. One who is inquisitive about the absolute truth must approach a spiritual master. And another one from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by sage Prabhuda to Nimai Maharaj. Tasmat Gurum Papajeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttama. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. So Prabhupada told the boy that he has to understand first what is a spiritual master before he can approach one. On his part, the Guru must not commit the 9th offense in chanting, which is to award the holy name to a faithless person. They must examine each other for a year. I would like to update you on some events in my devotional service since we met in devotional service. First, I'd like to give you a report from Ishwara Govinda on the Legacy Project. He and Chaitanya Chandradaya were figuring out the total amount of books that I have written, including the long series Every Day Just Right, which comes to some 70 volumes. Most of you must be familiar with that book. The first volume was called Welcome Home to the One Big Book of Your Life. And in the introduction I said, I'm always having to think after I finish one book of what book I will write next. But now I'm going to write just one book for my whole life. And I made that open-ended proposal in the early 1990s. And I kept it up for a long time. It was like a journal, which I kept mostly in Ireland, but also in Europe and the Caribbean as I traveled. And we published many little volumes of books, EJW. So they haven't posted all those books. And there are the books lessons from the road, which have to be posted. So if you include all those books, it comes to something like 215. I remember Bhagavad Purana, who's back here from India, alienated from his Vrindavan Dham, was with me just before he went to India, and he quipped that for my disciples it was every day just read. Because I gave them so much to read, they had nothing to do but to read. So they have now posted 130 books in ebook format. And that's a great accomplishment. They're available. You go to the SDG Legacy site and you have two options. One option is to read the book right away. You press the button and the book flashes up in 2 pages. And as you read it, it automatically turns the pages. And the other option is to download the book onto your e-book device, your Kindle or your Sony or whatever e-book you have that's compatible to our e-books. I have seen Narayan Kavacha reading his in Kindle. He takes it with him to the doctor's appointments. He told me recently he went to a doctor's appointment where they were poking him with needles for a long period of time, and he asked the doctor, "Can I read while you do this?" The doctor said, "I've never had anyone read while I've done this. But if you want to, you can." And so Narayan read his Kindle while the doctor painfully poked away. So you should all get a reader and download as many books as you want. The wonderful thing is they're all free. No charge. So there's a legacy project team. There are 3 devotees who want to help, but they're busy. Yugala Kishore, Adan Gopal, and Anandamaya Devi Dasi from Ireland. Then there are 3 devotees who are actually helping. The American Nitai Das, who lives in Vrindavan, and 2 devotees from Rochester, Dinesh and Priya. The books they're working on now are Death and Dying, Handbook for Krishna Consciousness, Prabhupada Appreciation, Prabhupada Lila Reading Reform, Prabhupada Nectar Vaishnava Behavior, with Srila Prabhupada in the early days, my letters from Srila Prabhupada Volume 1, You Cannot Leave Boston, my letters from Srila Prabhupada Volume 2, and Human at Best. This means they're cleaning up the manuscripts by a kind of light proofreading of them, not a heavy proofreading where you have to know the grammatical art, and all spelling and commas, but just basic misspellings like Krishna and Prabhupada that may occur in the manuscript. And then there are books that he doesn't even have. So I'm going to read this list out, and if any of you have these books, you can lend your copy to Ishvara Govinda because he needs it. He doesn't have a copy of such an important book as Entering the Life of Prayer. He doesn't have a copy of Shack Notes, Talking Freely to My Lords, 108 Japa Poems. I have a copy of that book in my room. I am never displeased with any member. My letters from Srila Prabhupada, Volume 3. Songs from Stuyvesant Falls, Poems. Lessons from the Road, Volume 14. Photo Preaching, Vandanam. If you have those books, lend a copy to him so he can get it ready for the ebook format. I am very pleased that we have 130 books posted. And here is the latest news from MOSA, the Museum of Sacred Art. In early November, Baladeva Bijabhusana delivered 80 paintings of mine to Mahaprabhu of MOSA. They are now the property of MOSA. We made up a contract that within 2 years, MOSA will hold a one-man exhibit of these 80 paintings in a prominent gallery and publish a book with photos of all the paintings in it. Digitized photos. Satyaraj Prabhu has written an essay for the book, and I'd like to read excerpts from his essay. Some might say his art is too free, too devil-may-care, too full of wild abandon. But if this is what they say, they are missing the point. With his work falling well into the realm of outsider art or art brut, French for raw art or rough art, SDG engages in a legitimate art form that is not constrained by the conventional dictates of the art world. One of the pioneers of this artistic movement was the painter and sculptor Jean Dubuffet, who referred to it as, quote, beyond the boundaries of established cultural norms. He favored the naive art, and accordingly he would have loved SDG's work, whose art is clearly outsider, not only in that it is self-taught and unconventional, but also in that it is the work of a Hare Krishna monk. Then he mentions that just to be an ISKCON makes you an outsider. There are many who cling to old, inconceived emotions, exaggerated stereotypes, judging the movement harshly. And in this sense, SGG can be seen as representing a tradition that is quite outside the norm. Again, placing his work squarely within the realm of outsider art. Additionally, even within ISKCON, his avant-garde jazz-like painting style could be considered outside art, and that it is unprecedented and sometimes even frowned upon. What's that squeaking noise? Nonetheless, this essay will reveal how he came to develop his unique style and how various successes have led not only to self-validation, but also to acceptance within the larger artistic community. Then he tells how I moved to the Lower East Side and met Srila Prabhupada and surrendered to him, and took on duties in the movement. Eventually became a GBC member and a sannyasi, and led a very regimented life, carrying out duties for ISKCON. Then in the late 1980s, I formally resigned from the GBC because of migraine headaches. And I traveled in a motorhome and a van. And then I started taking retreats. The need for these retreats became more and more pronounced too, for another reason. The pressures of ISKCON management still seemed to surround him, despite formally distancing himself from it. His dedication to Prabhupada's movement continued unabated, but his endeavors to help were often frustrated because of his failing health, which included debilitating migraines. All this reached a crescendo in the south of Ireland, where in a simple cottage in the Wicklow Mountains he began to paint as a personal release, first just by drawing on pieces of newsprint, which is low-cost, non-archival paper, usually used only for newspapers, and then with the help of Baladev, his disciple assistant, who supplied the necessary materials with acrylics on regular canvas. It was a little late in life, but he painted with great enthusiasm, discovering a spontaneity that he had long buried in favor of his monastic pursuits. Some might compare him to Grandma Moses, the renowned American folk artist who began painting at the age of 78, though he was only in his early 50s. During this early period in Ireland, SDG would vigorously poke and push his brush against large canvases, almost like artistic sword fighting, slashing and swooshing with wild abandon. He was free at last. It was physically and emotionally liberating, and it was producing numerous works of art, mainly centered on Krishna and his spiritual master. For 5 years, SDG would know his most productive period as he developed his own brand of art brut. It may have been naive art, even crude from the standpoint of a trained eye, but one who knew how to detect Krishna's presence could see an entirely different canvas. Divinity was as present in SDG's paintings as it was in more traditionally executed masterpieces of devotion. For others, his work exuded abundant heart, a certain freedom of expression, and those sensitive to such things could appreciate it on yet another level. It embodied a type of honesty and simplicity that would appeal to almost anyone who approached it without preconceived notions of good or bad, or expectations of ordinary expertise. It was good therapy for him too, and the results were colorful and heartwarming. He liked what he was producing, and so did others. One devotee, Kirtan Ras Das, who was also a lawyer and former professional artist, was among the first to appreciate SDG's work, having visited him in Ireland early on. He reflects on the criticism he had heard in those days, but waxes philosophical on the true value of the art itself. He says, "I have heard the criticism. His work is simplistic, there is no evident training, it is childlike. Yes, that's all true. It's also true that the work is expressive, honest, humorous, and evocative of the artist's mood and life. One critic said, 'My 6-year-old can do that.' My reply was, 'Yes, but can you?' Picasso once said, 'We are all artists when we are children. The goal, though, is to stay being an artist.' Satsvarupa Maharaj has. The critic with the 6-year-old hasn't. There is a direct, non-self-conscious quality to a child's art. It is the same with Satsvarupa Maharaj's. In the art world, it is called raw or outside art. People with an innate need for creating, pick up a brush or pen or pastel and just have at it. They don't give a damn what others think. The important thing, the goal, is to let it out, to create, to free their 6-year-old and let him trash the art room. Satsvarupa Maharaj reaches the goal every time a brush finds its way into his hand. Satsvarupa Maharaj's art has devotion. His need to create walks hand in hand with his need and desire to deepen his love for God. What artist can fully realize and duplicate the sublime beauty of either the Lord or creation? How many singers of kirtan, call and response chanting, have operatic voices or formal voice training? Should one allow shortcomings to abort the artistic product? Or should the inspiration to create be honored within the confines of one's abilities? I don't favor erring on the side of repression, and neither does Satsvarupa Maharaj. His work is an exercise in free expression and an offering of love. Overall, SDG's oeuvre is outsider art, pure and simple, which Dubuffet elaborated on as, quote, "Those works created from solitude and from pure and authentic creative impulses, where the worries of competition, acclaim, and social promotion do not interfere, are, because of these very facts, more precious than the productions of professionals." Then he tells of my meeting up with Chris Murray, the director of Govinda Galleries, and how in 2001 I had a one-man show at Govinda's Galleries. Chris wrote in the catalog to the show, "Spontaneous and instinctive, the creative process in his work parallels the constant process of spiritual growth in his own life. For Satsvarupa, the nature of art and life is process. The endeavor is the perfection." This indeed quite eloquently sums up SDG and his work. Then he tells about the favorable review I got in the Washington Post. Most recently, with the publication of the massive Forms of Devotion, a richly illustrated 2-volume encyclopedic work, some 500 pages each, in a handsomely designed box set, SDG has hit his stride. Under the general editorship of Shushma K. Bal, author, artist, and cultural advisor, this work documents a substantive collection of the best in Indian art, with articles by numerous well-known scholars and the works of over 200 artists who have made significant contributions. SGD's work is included as a matter of course. Here's the encyclopedia. Take out volume 2. Many of the ISKCON artists are in here, like Parikshit, Dhriti, Pushkar, and others. And many, many Indian artists like the Sharma family, who do those pudgy Krishna cowboy boy pictures and pictures of Radha and Krishna. So they gave me 4 pages in the book. You won't be able to see it well, but I'll just hold it up. You can help me hold it up. Here's a picture of Radha and Krishna done in 203. And a picture of Krishna and Parvati. And turn the page. A picture called Prabhupada and Me, 2003. And a picture of Loni Tai, 2003. Satyaraj writes, with the validation that comes from being recognized by his peers, as evidenced by this magnificent, one-of-a-kind tone, SDG will no doubt become an important artistic voice in the 21st century, and beyond. We are gathering today in the formal Vyasa Puja program. I don't want to speak too long because I want to leave plenty of time for the homages. Baladev from Trinidad has told me that devotees have complained that they never get a chance to present their homages. This is because we use the system of having the senior-most disciples speak first. So this year we will try a different system, alphabetical order of your spiritual name. In other words, if your name is Abhishek Das, you get to speak first. If your name is Yadinath Das, you have to wait. I always feel embarrassed hearing the homages of praise, but I take heart in that essay by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, which many of you are familiar with, humbler than a blade of grass. He writes sardonically and self-deprecatingly and humorously, saying, who is this person sitting with garlands around his neck, listening to his own praises with his own ears? Can a brute like this ever be rescued from his egotism? he has taken a higher seat and others have taken a lower seat. What bombastic laudations, what hyperboles. And he says, I happen to be an ignorant fool. I never take advice from anyone. So I took my case to Mahaprabhu, and he said, become a guru and save the people of this land, and I will always be with you. So I took courage that it was my duty to become guru and let others criticize me. But I have to accept the homages of my disciples and execute my duty as a spiritual master.